My son said, "I'll put you in a nursing home if you don't sign the house." I signed, but he didn't know. When my son Derek slammed that paper down on my kitchen table and told me I had 72 hours to sign over my house or he'd have me locked away in a nursing home, I picked up the pen and signed. He smiled like he'd won. But what Derek didn't know was that I'd already spoken to an attorney 3 days earlier. What he didn't know was that I'd been quietly building a case against him for over 14 months. What he didn't know was that the document he was so proud of wasn't worth the paper it was printed on. And what he truly never saw coming was the moment a judge would look him dead in the eye and tell him exactly what kind of man he was. Good day, dear listeners. It's Isabella again. I'm glad you're here with me. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end, and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. Today's story is one that still gives me chills. It's about a mother who gave everything, a son who took everything, and the quiet, devastating moment when the truth finally came to light. So settle in, because this one runs deep. My name is Margaret Ann Caldwell. I'm 73 years old, and I live in a small blue house on Sycamore Lane in Knoxville, Tennessee. It's the kind of house that doesn't look like much from the road. Just a simple one-story with white shutters and a porch that creaks when the wind blows. But that house holds 41 years of memories. Every wall, every floorboard, every crack in the ceiling tells a story. My husband, Harold Caldwell, and I bought that house in 1983, the year our second child was born. Harold was a machinist at the old Riverside manufacturing plant. He worked 6 days a week for 34 years, and he never once complained. Not once. He used to say, "Margaret, a man who has a roof, a garden, and a woman who laughs at his jokes has got no right to complain about anything." And he meant it. Harold passed away on November 9th, 2017, from complications related to pancreatic cancer. He was 68 years old. We had been married for 39 years. After his funeral, I stood in our kitchen and looked at the roses he'd planted along the back fence, red and white, alternating, like little soldiers standing guard. I told myself I'd keep those roses alive if it was the last thing I did, and I have, every single one of them. We had 2 children. Our daughter, Lydia Caldwell Price, lives in Asheville, North Carolina, with her husband Tom and their 2 kids, Ella, who's 14, and baby Sam, who just turned 6. Lydia is a school counselor. She calls me every Sunday at exactly 7 in the evening, and she never misses, not once in 6 years. Then there's Derek Allen Caldwell, my firstborn, born June 12th, 1981. 43 years old now, and the reason I'm telling this story today. For most of his life, Derek was a good boy. Maybe not the most ambitious, maybe not the most careful with money, but good-hearted. Or so I believed. He married a woman named Vanessa McKee in 2009, and for a while, things seemed fine. They had a son, Tyler, who's now 13. Derek worked in commercial real estate for a firm called Brentwood Property Solutions out of Nashville. He drove a nice car. He wore nice suits. He talked about investments and equity and market timing like he was some kind of Wall Street genius. But as I would learn, much too late, most of it was smoke. The trouble didn't start with a bang. It started the way most trouble does, quietly, wrapped up in something that looked like love. It was in January of 2021 when Derek first asked me for money. He came over on a Sunday afternoon, which was unusual because Derek almost never visited on Sundays. He sat down at the kitchen table, right in Harold's old chair, the one with the worn-out cushion I still can't bring myself to replace, and he told me that he and Vanessa were going through a rough patch financially. He said the real estate market had taken a dip, that a couple of deals had fallen through, and that they were short on their mortgage by about 3 months. "It's temporary, Mom," he said. "Just a bridge loan, basically. We'll pay you back by April." I didn't hesitate. What mother would? I wrote him a check for $8,500 that very afternoon. I remember the exact amount because I had to move money from my savings account, the one Harold and I had built together over decades. It felt strange writing a check that large, but Derek was my son, and he said he needed help. April came and went. No repayment. I didn't ask. I figured he was embarrassed, and I didn't want to make things worse. Then in June of that same year, he called me on a Tuesday night at around 9:15. He sounded stressed. He said Vanessa's car had broken down, and they needed to replace it quickly because she used it to drive Tyler to school and to her part-time job at a dental office. He asked for $12,000. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious, Mom, he said. You know that. I transferred the money the next morning. $12,000. Gone from my account like smoke. By the end of 2021, I had given Derek a total of $27,500. I kept a small notebook where I wrote down every amount, every date, every reason he gave. Not because I distrusted him, not then. I kept the notebook because Harold had always taught me to track every penny. Money doesn't disappear, Margaret, he used to say. It just moves, and you should always know where it went. In 2022, the requests got bigger and more frequent. In February, Derek needed $6,000 for what he called an unexpected tax bill. In April, it was $4,200 for Tyler's private school tuition. In July, it was $9,000 for what he described as a business opportunity that couldn't wait. Each time, he had a reason. Each time, it sounded urgent. Each time, I gave. I canceled a trip to see my sister in Savannah. I postponed dental work I desperately needed, a crown on my lower left molar that had been giving me trouble for months. I started buying the cheaper brand of everything at the grocery store. I stopped going to the little Italian restaurant Harold and I used to love, the one on Market Street with the red checkered tablecloths. By December of 2022, the total had climbed to $61,700. I remember sitting at my kitchen table on New Year's Eve, alone, with that notebook open in front of me. The number stared back at me, cold and unblinking. $61,700. That was more than Harold had earned in some entire years at the plant, and not a single cent had been repaid. I called Lydia that night. I didn't tell her the exact amount, but I told her I was worried about Derek's finances. She went quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Mom, have you looked at Vanessa's Facebook page lately? I hadn't. I barely knew how to use Facebook, but Lydia walked me through it, step by step over the phone, and what I found made my stomach drop. Vanessa had posted photos from a vacation in Cancun, dated November 2022. There were pictures of her and Derek on a beach, holding cocktails, standing in front of a resort that looked like it cost more per night than my monthly grocery budget. There were photos of new furniture, a living room that looked like it belonged in a magazine. There was a post from October showing off a brand new SUV, a white Lexus parked in their driveway with the caption "Blessed and Grateful," followed by 3 red heart emojis. My hands trembled. I set the phone down on the table and stared at Harold's roses through the kitchen window. The roses were dormant in winter, just bare brown stalks. They looked the way I felt, stripped, exposed, cold, but I didn't confront Derek, not yet. Something told me to wait. Something Harold used to say came back to me. Don't swing until you know exactly where the ball is, Margaret. So I waited, and I watched. In March of 2023, Derek came to visit again. This time, he brought Vanessa. They sat in my living room and made small talk for about 20 minutes, asking about my health, commenting on how nice the house looked. Then Derek leaned forward and said something that changed everything. Mom, we've been thinking. This house is too big for you. You're alone here. What if you fell? What if something happened in the middle of the night? We think it would be better, safer, if you signed the house over to us. We take care of the maintenance, the taxes, everything. You could still live here, of course, but the house would be in our name. It's just practical. I looked at him. I looked at Vanessa, who was nodding slowly, her face arranged in an expression of concern that didn't quite reach her eyes. I looked at the mantelpiece where Harold's photo sat in its silver frame, the one from our 30th anniversary, him in that blue tie he loved, smiling like he had a secret. Let me think about it, I said. Of course, Derek said. Take your time. But I could see it in his eyes. He wasn't asking. He was expecting. Something cold settled in my chest that evening, after they left. Not sadness, not yet. Something sharper, clearer, like a window being opened in a room that had been sealed shut for too long. I sat in Harold's chair and I looked at that notebook. I looked at the photos Lydia had helped me save from Facebook. I looked at the empty space in my savings account. And I made a decision. The next morning, Monday, March 20th, 2023, at exactly 9:15 in the morning, I called the law office of Barbara Hendricks and Associates on Gay Street in downtown Knoxville. I had never met Barbara Hendricks, but my neighbor, Helen Pratt, a retired teacher who had lived next door for 22 years, had recommended her. She's sharp as a tack and she doesn't suffer fools, Helen told me. If anyone can help you, Barbara can. I got an appointment for that Thursday. I dressed carefully that morning, navy blue cardigan, clean slacks, the small pearl earrings Harold had given me for our 20th anniversary. I brought my notebook. I brought printouts of every bank transfer. I brought the screenshots from Vanessa's Facebook. And I brought a folder of documents related to the house, the original deed, the property tax records, the mortgage payoff statement from 2001. Barbara Hendricks was a tall woman in her late 50s with short gray hair, reading glasses on a chain around her neck, and the kind of handshake that told you she meant business. Her office smelled like coffee and old paper. She sat me down, offered me water, and said, "Tell me everything, Mrs. Caldwell. Start from the beginning and don't leave anything out." So I did. I talked for over an hour. She listened without interrupting, taking notes on a yellow legal pad with a fountain pen. When I finished, she set the pen down and looked at me over the top of her glasses. "Mrs. Caldwell," she said, "what your son has been doing has a name. It's called elder financial exploitation. And in the state of Tennessee, it's a crime. I felt the air go out of my lungs. A crime. My own son." Barbara explained that under Tennessee law, specifically Tennessee Code, annotated section 71-6-117, it is illegal for any person to knowingly exploit an elderly or vulnerable adult by deception, intimidation, or undue influence for the purpose of obtaining control over their property, assets, or finances. She said the pattern of escalating monetary demands, combined with the failure to repay, the lavish spending on themselves while claiming poverty, and now the attempt to obtain the deed to my house, painted a very clear picture. "Here's what I want you to do," Barbara said. "I want you to go home and act normal. Don't confront him. Don't change your behavior. If he brings up the house again, don't refuse outright. Stall. Tell him you're considering it. Meanwhile, I'm going to start building your case. I want bank records, phone records, text messages, everything. And I'm going to bring in a forensic accountant to trace where your money actually went." I did exactly as she said. For the next several months, I played the part of the trusting, slightly confused old mother that Derek apparently thought I was. And during that time, I documented everything. In May of 2023, Derek texted me, "Mom, have you thought more about the house? Vanessa and I really think it's the best option for everyone. Let's get it done before summer." I saved the text. I showed it to Barbara. In July, he called and asked for another $15,000. He said it was for a once-in-a-lifetime investment opportunity in a commercial property development near Franklin, Tennessee. He said he could triple the money in 18 months. I told him I needed to check my accounts. Then I called Barbara. She told me to give him the money, but to wire it in a way that would be fully traceable. I did. $15,000, wired on July 14th, 2023, at 2:47 in the afternoon. The forensic accountant, a man named Curtis Webb from a firm called Pennington Financial Analytics, later traced that money directly to a payment on Derek's personal credit card, which had been used to purchase a $7,200 Rolex watch and a $4,800 weekend getaway at a spa resort in Gatlinburg. By September of 2023, the total amount I had transferred to Derek stood at $93,200. $93,200. Money that Harold and I had saved over a lifetime of careful, honest work. Money that was supposed to see me through my final years. Gone. Spent on watches, vacations, luxury cars, and restaurant meals that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Then came the day that changed everything. October 14th, 2023, a Saturday. I remember it was raining, a cold, steady rain that made the windows fog up and turned the garden into a gray blur. I was sitting in the living room reading a novel when I heard a car pull into the driveway. Then another car. Then voices. Derek came through the front door without knocking. He was carrying a manila envelope. Behind him came Vanessa, and behind Vanessa came a man I'd never seen before, tall, thin, wearing a gray suit and carrying a briefcase. Derek introduced him as a notary, here to make things official. Derek sat down across from me and pulled a document out of the envelope. It was a quitclaim deed, transferring full ownership of my house, the house Harold and I had bought in 1983, the house where I'd raised my children, the house where Harold's roses still bloomed every spring, to Derek Allen Caldwell and Vanessa McKee Caldwell. "Mom," Derek said, and his voice had a hard edge I'd never heard before. "We need to get this done. Today." "Derek, I told you I needed more time to think," I said. He leaned forward. "Mom, let me be real with you. You're 73 years old. You live alone. You've been forgetting things. You left the stove on last month." That was a lie. I never left the stove on. We're worried about you. And honestly, if you're not going to be reasonable about this, we might have to look into other options. A nursing home, assisted living, somewhere where people can keep an eye on you. I stared at him. "Are you threatening me, Derek?" "I'm not threatening you. I'm being realistic. This house is too much for you. You can't maintain it. And frankly, if you don't cooperate, I'll have no choice but to talk to a judge about having you declared mentally incompetent. I've already spoken to a doctor about it." The room went silent. The rain hammered against the windows. I could hear the clock on the mantelpiece ticking. The same clock Harold had wound every Sunday evening for 39 years. I looked at the document. I looked at the pen Derek was holding out to me. And I thought about what Barbara Hendricks had told me just 2 days earlier, on Thursday, October 12th, during our latest meeting. If he tries to get you to sign anything, sign it. Don't worry. A quitclaim deed signed under duress and undue influence by an elderly person whose son has been systematically exploiting her financially is not worth the paper it's printed on. Let him think he's won. That's when people get careless, and that's when we'll have him. So I took the pen. My hand was steady, and I signed. Derek smiled. Vanessa smiled. The notary stamped the document. They left within 15 minutes. They didn't ask if I'd eaten dinner. They didn't ask about my health. They didn't even close the front door all the way. I sat in the quiet house for a long time after they left. Then I picked up the phone and called Barbara Hendricks at her home number, the one she'd given me for emergencies. "He did it," I said. "He brought a notary and everything." "Good," Barbara said. "Now we move." And move we did. Over the next 8 weeks, Barbara assembled a case that was, in her words, as airtight as a submarine. She had Curtis Webb's forensic accounting report, which traced every dollar I'd given Derek and showed exactly where it went. Luxury purchases, vacations, credit card payments, none of it to mortgages or emergencies or Tyler's tuition. Tyler, it turned out, attended a public school and always had. The private school tuition had been a complete fabrication. Barbara also brought in a private investigator named Detective Frank Herrera, a retired Knoxville Police Department detective who now ran his own firm. Detective Herrera obtained records showing that Derek's real estate career was largely a facade. He hadn't closed a significant deal in over 2 years. His income during the period when he was taking my money came almost entirely from me. I was, in effect, funding his entire lifestyle. Barbara also had something else, a recording. Tennessee is a one-party consent state, meaning I had the legal right to record any conversation I was part of without informing the other party. On Barbara's advice, I had begun recording my phone conversations with Derek in April of 2023 using a small digital recorder connected to my landline. I had 17 recordings in total. In one of them, dated August 3rd, 2023, Derek said, and I quote, "Mom, you're not going to need all that money anyway. You're 73. How much longer are you really going to be around? Might as well let us put it to good use." In another, from September 19th, Derek said, "If you don't help us out, I'm going to have to start making some tough decisions about your living situation. I don't want to, but you're not leaving me much choice." Barbara filed the case on December 4th, 2023, in Knox County Chancery Court. The complaint alleged elder financial exploitation under Tennessee state law, fraud, undue influence, and sought to void the quitclaim deed, recover all funds transferred under false pretenses, and obtain punitive damages. Barbara also filed a referral with the Knox County District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. Derek was served papers on December 8th, 2023, at 9:20 in the morning, at his home in Brentwood. According to the process server's affidavit, Derek opened the door in his bathrobe, read the first page, and his face went white. He called me that afternoon. I let it go to voicemail. The message said, "Mom, what the hell is this? Are you seriously suing me? Your own son? This is insane. You need to call off your lawyer right now. I'm not going to stand for this. You're going to regret this, I promise you." I saved the voicemail. I forwarded it to Barbara. 2 days later, Vanessa called. Her tone was very different from Derek's. Sweet, pleading, manipulative. "Margaret, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. We love you. Derek loves you. He's just been under so much stress. Can't we sit down and talk about this like family? Lawyers don't need to be involved." I said, "Vanessa, my attorney has advised me not to discuss the case with you or Derek. If you want to communicate, please have your lawyer contact Barbara Hendricks." Then I hung up. The following week, I started getting phone calls from people I hadn't heard from in years. Derek's old college roommate, a cousin on Harold's side I barely knew. Even my sister-in-law, Frances, whom I'd always gotten along with. They all said some version of the same thing. "Margaret, Derek says you're suing him over a misunderstanding. He says you're confused. He says the lawyer is taking advantage of you. Are you sure you know what you're doing?" Derek was running a campaign. He was calling everyone he could think of, painting me as a senile old woman who'd been tricked by a predatory attorney. It was the last play of a desperate man. But it didn't work, because the people who actually knew me, the people who mattered, knew better. Helen Pratt, my neighbor, told Frances directly, "Margaret Caldwell is sharper than anyone half her age. If she's suing that boy, he deserves it." My friend Dolores Whitfield from my Wednesday morning book club said to anyone who'd listen, "I've known Margaret for 18 years. That woman doesn't forget a thing. If she says her son robbed her, then her son robbed her." Even Pastor Jim at my church, though I kept him at arm's length from the details, told me quietly one Sunday, "Margaret, Whatever you're going through, you have my support, and you have God's. Lydia flew in from Asheville the week before Christmas. She stayed with me for 10 days. She helped me organize every document, every receipt, every recording. She sat with me when I cried, and she held my hand when I said, "I never thought my own son would do this to me." She looked at me with her father's eyes and said, "Mom, you did nothing wrong. He did, and he's going to answer for it." The hearing was scheduled for March 11th, 2024, in Knox County Chancery Court before the Honorable Judge Patricia Ellen Morrison. I'd never been inside a courtroom before. The building was cold and smelled like floor polish and old wood. The courtroom itself was smaller than I expected, with dark paneling and fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly overhead. There were wooden benches like pews in a church. Barbara and I sat at a table on the left. Derek and his attorney, a younger man named Scott Frazier from a Nashville firm, sat on the right. Derek wouldn't look at me. He sat with his arms crossed, his jaw tight, staring straight ahead. Vanessa sat in the gallery behind him, clutching her purse like a life preserver. Barbara presented our case methodically. She started with the financial records, every transfer, every date, every amount, every excuse Derek had given. She showed the court Curtis Webb's forensic accounting report, which demonstrated that not a single dollar of the $93,200 I'd given Derek had gone to any of the stated purposes. Not to mortgage payments, not to car repairs, not to school tuition, not to tax bills, not to business investments. Every dollar had gone to personal luxury spending. Then Barbara played 3 of the recordings. The courtroom went very quiet. Derek's attorney objected. Judge Morrison overruled him. The recordings played through speakers that crackled slightly. Derek's voice filled the room, casual and dismissive, talking about how I wouldn't need my money because I wouldn't be alive much longer, talking about tough decisions regarding my living situation. I watched the judge's face as she listened. Her expression didn't change, but her pen stopped moving across her notepad. She looked up at Derek once, briefly, and then looked away. Barbara then presented the quitclaim deed. She called in a handwriting expert, Dr. Lynette Okafor, who testified that while the signature on the deed was indeed mine, the circumstances under which it was obtained, the presence of an unannounced notary, the verbal threats of institutionalization, the pattern of ongoing financial exploitation, constituted textbook undue influence and legal duress. Detective Frank Herrera testified about his investigation into Derek's finances and employment. He presented evidence showing that Derek had been terminated from Brentwood Property Solutions in March of 2021, a full 2 months after his first request for money from me. He had never told me he'd lost his job. He'd continued to pretend he was a successful real estate professional for over 2 years, while living almost entirely off money he extracted from his elderly mother. Scott Frazier, Derek's attorney, tried to argue that the money was given as gifts and that the house transfer was voluntary. He produced no evidence to support either claim. When Judge Morrison asked Derek directly if he had ever told his mother he would have her declared mentally incompetent if she didn't sign the deed, Derek hesitated. His attorney whispered something to him. Derek said, "I don't recall using those exact words." Judge Morrison looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "Mr. Caldwell, I have a recording in which you use those exact words. Would you like to hear it again?" Derek said nothing. The ruling came on March 29th, 2024. Judge Morrison issued a 47-page written decision. I'll never forget what she said in her summary. Barbara read it to me over the phone, and then I read it myself 3 times at my kitchen table. The evidence presented in this case paints a clear and deeply troubling picture of sustained, deliberate financial exploitation of an elderly parent by her adult son. Mr. Derek Allen Caldwell engaged in a systematic pattern of deception, manipulation, and intimidation designed to extract maximum financial benefit from his mother, Mrs. Margaret Ann Caldwell, while she was grieving the loss of her husband and living alone. The court finds that the quitclaim deed executed on October 14, 2023, was obtained through undue influence and duress and is hereby declared null and void. The court further orders full restitution of all funds extracted from Mrs. Caldwell, totaling $93,200, plus statutory interest. Additionally, the court awards punitive damages in the amount of $75,000, reflecting the egregious nature of Mr. Caldwell's conduct and the need to deter such behavior. Total judgment, $168,200, plus interest, plus attorney's fees. Derek's world collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. He couldn't pay the judgment. He didn't have the money. It had all been spent. His attorney negotiated a payment plan, but it required Derek to liquidate assets. The white Lexus was sold. The Rolex was sold. The expensive furniture was sold. It wasn't enough. The Knox County District Attorney's Office, following Barbara's referral, opened a criminal investigation. In June of 2024, Derek was formally charged with 2 counts of elder financial exploitation, a Class A felony in Tennessee. He was arrested on a Tuesday morning at 6:45. I was told later that he cried during the booking process, but that wasn't the end of it. The criminal charges and the public nature of the case destroyed Derek's reputation completely. His name appeared in the Knoxville News Sentinel. A local television station ran a story about it. People he'd known for years stopped returning his calls. The few remaining professional contacts he had in real estate vanished overnight. Vanessa filed for divorce in August of 2024. In her filing, she claimed she had been unaware of the full extent of Derek's financial dealings with his mother. I don't know if that's true. Barbara said it didn't matter for our purposes. The divorce was finalized in November. Vanessa got primary custody of Tyler. Derek was ordered to pay child support, which, given his financial situation, he could barely manage. By the end of 2024, Derek was living in a 1-bedroom apartment in a rundown complex on the south side of Knoxville. He'd lost his house, his wife, his car, his reputation, and very nearly his freedom. In February of 2025, as part of a plea agreement, he pled guilty to 1 count of elder financial exploitation and was sentenced to 3 years of supervised probation, 200 hours of community service, mandatory financial counseling, and a restitution order that would follow him for decades. I saw him one last time. It was in April of 2025 at a Kroger on Kingston Pike. I was in the produce section, squeezing avocados the way Harold used to teach me, checking for that slight give that means they're perfect. I looked up and there he was, standing at the end of the aisle with a basket that held a loaf of store-brand bread, a carton of eggs, and a box of instant rice. He looked 10 years older than his age. His clothes were wrinkled. His eyes had a hollowed-out look, like someone had scooped out whatever used to fill them. He saw me. He stopped. We stood there for maybe 5 seconds, though it felt like 5 minutes. He opened his mouth like he was going to say something. Then he closed it. Then he turned and walked away. I felt nothing, not triumph, not pity, not satisfaction, just a quiet certainty, solid as stone, that the right thing had been done, not the easy thing, not the painless thing, the right thing. The money came back slowly through the restitution payments and the liquidation of Derek's assets. By the summer of 2025, I had recovered just over $112,000 of the total judgment, with the remainder on a court-ordered payment schedule. Barbara Hendricks told me the rest would come eventually, even if it took years. Judgments don't expire, Margaret, she said with a thin smile, and neither do you. I used some of that money to do things I'd been putting off for years. I got my dental work done, finally that crown that had bothered me for 3 years. I had the house painted, inside and out, the first time since 2014. I replaced the old water heater that had been making worrying noises since Harold died. I bought new curtains for the kitchen, white ones with little blue flowers, because Harold always said the kitchen should feel like morning even at night. But the thing that mattered most to me wasn't what I spent the money on. It was what I did with the feeling of having my home back, the feeling of being believed, the feeling of knowing that I mattered, that my life's work mattered, that the savings Harold and I had built together over 4 decades of careful, honest, unglamorous labor couldn't just be taken by someone who thought I was too old and too trusting to fight back. I set aside $25,000 in a college fund for Ella and Sam, Lydia's children, my grandchildren who had never asked me for a single thing except my time and my hugs. I donated $5,000 to the East Tennessee Legal Aid Society, which provides free legal services to elderly people facing financial exploitation. I wrote a check and included a note that said, "For the next Margaret Caldwell who doesn't know where to turn." I started volunteering at the Knoxville Senior Center on Wednesday afternoons. I help other older adults understand their financial rights, read documents they're not sure about, and recognize the warning signs of exploitation, even when it comes from their own families, especially when it comes from their own families. I tell them my story. I tell them about the Notebook. I tell them about Barbara Hendricks. I tell them that being old doesn't mean being helpless, and that loving your children doesn't mean letting them destroy you. I also took a trip. In September of 2025, Lydia and I flew to Charleston, South Carolina, a place Harold and I had always talked about visiting but never got around to. We walked along the waterfront. We ate shrimp and grits at a restaurant with ceiling fans and live jazz. We watched the sun set over the harbor, and I thought about Harold, and I cried a little, and I laughed a lot, and I felt more like myself than I had in years. Helen Pratt, my neighbor, told me the other day, "Margaret, I don't know what you've done, but you look 10 years younger." I told her I hadn't done anything special. I just stopped carrying a weight I was never supposed to carry in the first place. There's a picture on my mantelpiece now, right next to Harold's anniversary photo. It's from Charleston, Lydia and me on that waterfront bench, both of us smiling, the water behind us catching the last light of the day. Every morning when I pass it, I stop for just a second, and I look at it, and I think, I'm still here, I'm still standing, and this house is still mine. Harold's roses bloomed beautifully this past spring, red and white, alternating, just like he planted them. I stood at the back fence and looked at them for a long time, and I said out loud, to no one and to Harold and to the sky, "I kept them alive, sweetheart, just like I promised. I kept everything alive." So here's what I've learned, and I hope you carry it with you. Love should never cost you your dignity. Trust is earned, not inherited, and it is never, ever too late to stand up for yourself, no matter how old you are, no matter who is standing against you. So I ask you, if someone you loved, someone you raised, someone you gave everything to, turned around and tried to take everything you had left, would you fight back? Would you find the strength to say, "No, not this, not me, not today"? Tell me what you would do. Share your thoughts below and subscribe for more stories. Your voice matters to me, and every comment, every story you share helps someone else find the courage to take that first step. Thank you for listening.